The following compilation features unsettling and spine-chilling tales sourced from Reddit's horror communities. Reader discretion is strongly advised. These narratives may contain graphic descriptions, psychological distress, and themes that could unsettle sensitive individuals. Proceed with caution, as immersion into these eerie stories may provoke fear, unease, and sleep disturbances. Enter this realm of Reddit's creepy horror stories at your own risk, as the line between reality and the macabre may blur within these chilling narratives. Story 1.
I agreed to a drug trial from a door-to-door salesman named Anura. This last week has been strange. The man with the pills came on Friday. I heard the knocks and began sneaking from my normal place, the lazy boy in front of my flat screen, towards the front room. I saw a short, round silhouette standing on the other side of the oval stained glass window of the front door. I waited for the shape to leave or knock again, but neither happened. I slid from the living room into the hallway and then against the wall. "Excuse me, sir, you are terribly hidden," the shape said. "If you would prefer me to come back another time, that can be arranged, but I would love to show you something first." "Who exactly are you? Some kind of salesman?" I couldn't believe I replied, but the professional tone and British accent drew me in. "Some kind of salesman? Indeed," said the shape. "I've come to bring you what you need. You see, I know for certain I have. If you'd only open the door, I'll prove it to you. Come now, I can't stand here all day. Haven't you ever heard of catching more flies with honey?" I said, opening the door. Curiosity had gotten the better of me. "Yes, as a matter of fact I have," said the salesman. "But I take it with a grain of salt. Flies will land on horse shit just as often." The man standing on my porch was funny looking, to say the least. If encouraged to be more descriptive, one would say he was unfortunate to look at. He had long, thin legs that went up to an abnormally round body. His arms were comparatively short, but thin as well. His hands were fat and had dimples on the knuckles. His head appeared to be connected directly to his shoulders. He was wearing a brown, three-piece suit. He had large hazel eyes and large bushy sideburns. He was holding a suitcase. I'll get right to it. "Mr. Treble, I have come to sell you something. It's not spot remover or a subscription to Reader's Digest. It's much more interesting." He sat the suitcase on the ground and unlatched the scuffed brass locks and quickly removed a glass vial. "This, my good man, is what you need. This diet pill will beef you up, burn fat, and give you the energy and concentration you need to succeed. This little pill will change your life." I looked at him for a moment in disbelief. This man, who I had never seen before, had the audacity to tell me what I needed. The salesman was right, though. This stranger had told me he had a cure for all of my specific problems. I admittedly am a bit chicken-legged and sort of rotund. I have been going through a creative block as well. I haven't really been able to make anything new for my clients. In fact, I was waiting on Jeannie to call me later that morning, expecting a new logo for a local appliance chain. Honestly, I've recently lost my energy and motivation to work, and apparently this miracle pill could fix it. Mark Ryan, my partner for nearly 15 years, had just brought up my lull in creativity last Thursday at our weekly meeting, or pit stop as we called it. "That's a look that I like to see," the salesman said. "My name is Mr. Anura, and no, I don't want your money." "Let's stop this mind-reading thing," I said. "I imagine you've been doing this for a while, and I'm sure there are common trends you're following. I'm not interested in any crazy drug that some door-to-door salesman is peddling out of his briefcase. Have a good day. Mr. Anura, I'm done here." I'll give you $5,000 if you try this drug for a week. He continued, if you take this bottle, finish the prescribed dosage, and live with the benefits for a week, I will pay you. He pulled a chewed stogie from his pocket, licked his lips, and bit down on it. What's the catch? I asked, watching the salesman chew his cigar. He laughed at my question, and for the first time, I thought I saw a neck. It ballooned out as he chortled. There isn't a catch. John, you sign a release that you'll be sure to read all of. You take the pills, and I bugger off. I come back in a week with a stack of cash for you, and I get to pick your brain. Let me know how you've been. John thought on it for a moment, and though that he couldn't possibly be dumb enough to fall for this, but that there would be no harm in looking over the release. As I read through the surprisingly thick release form, I arrived at a page with the header known side effects and felt my heartbeat speed up. This is where it all gets fucky, right? It's all been surprisingly agreeable, even the non-disclosure agreement. But here's where it all gets bad. I was very quickly relieved of those thoughts, as the side effects seemed to be quite mild, to me, anyway. Nausea, some sleeplessness, mild skin irritation. When I finally arrived at the page that contained a blank line for my signature, I looked up to the salesman for the first time in what had to have been 5 minutes. He was holding a pen in an outstretched hand, smiling. Agreeable, I imagine, Mr. Anura said, still smiling. What is you so convinced that I'm into this? Well, Anura said, still maintaining his smile, you don't appear to be a dumb man, and this is a pretty easy decision. You get a bunch of good stuff, including money. All you have to do is not talk about it, and deal with some rather small side effects. Suddenly it hit me that he'd been using my name throughout our entire conversation. How do you know my name? Excuse me. My name? You keep calling me by name. How do you know my name? I got a tip from a friend of yours. This isn't a chance meeting. John, Anura said, taking the stogie from his mouth. Your friend is trying to help you as much as I'm trying to help myself. Get you out of a rut. And of course, get me a check in my success column. Scratch my back. Yada, yada. And I would assume that you aren't going to say who threw me under the bus. You assume correctly. Mr. Treble. I sign. I take pills. And I get $5,000. No bullshit. No bullshit. Give me the pen. I walked back inside, bottle in hand. I gave it a small shake and read the note the salesman slipped me before walking off my porch. Don't hesitate to call me if anything of interest happens. Just follow these instructions, John, and get ready. This isn't snake oil. A. Take 1 pill by mouth 2 times per day until gone. Take with full glass of water. Do not take with empty stomach. Simple enough, I suppose, I said to myself. As I took the pill form, the bottle, and raised it to my mouth, my cell phone rang. Saved by the bell. I thought. Jeannie's name flashed on the caller ID. Heya, Jeannie. I was just about to call you. I've almost got that new logo done. I've just hit a couple snags. I'm going to send you something to... Mark is dead. His house burned down with him in it last night. Oh, I said, in a voice I didn't recognize. How? What happened? It looks like he fell asleep with a lit cigarette, Jeannie began, her voice hitching. He probably had one too many while watching the game and passed out. An image of Mark, with an empty 12-pack beside him, a lit Marlboro in his hand slowly burning down to the filter, flashed across my mind. Not unlikely. The Guardians had been playing hot and cold all season, and Mark often took his baseball-related frustrations out on his liver. John, Jeannie said, We are supposed to have a meeting with Olson Lumber today. Should I cancel? Yes, Jeannie. Of course. They'll understand. I can call Bill and tell him myself. Do Mark's parents know what happened? My head was spinning. I was on autopilot. I felt like I was pretending to be an adult. There was a pause. Then Jeannie seemed to snap back to it. Yeah, I called them first. Deputy Brahm called me as soon as he got there with the fire department. There was a strange echo to everything that she was saying to me. The phone felt as though it weighed 1,000 pounds, and my legs were giving out. Okay, I'm going to go now. All right? I hung up before she could respond. I looked down at the pill, which I'd placed on the counter when my phone rang, and took it. I drank my glass of water, but I couldn't be paid to give a shit about my empty stomach. I walked around my kitchen island for a little while, thinking about what my life looked like now, how I was going to run a business. Was I going to run a business? Mark did every damn thing. He took care of the books. He talked to the clients. He found the clients, for God's sake. All I did was draw pictures. Draw the damn pictures. I went to my computer and shook it awake with the mouse and got to work. I finished a logo in one pass. It was original. It was cool. It was complete. Anyone would happily pay money for it. I decided to finish up a presentation that I'd put off for a potential client that Mark was going to meet with tomorrow. Honestly, he could sell ice to a snowman, but this shit was gold. I looked down at the clock on my monitor and it read 8:45 p.m. 4 straight hours of work was a rare commodity in the life of a blocked artist. I needed to tell Mark that I pulled through, and we were going to bag this thing. Mark is fucking gone, I said to an empty house. Every single memory I had with Mark hit me like a brick. Move-in day at Ohio University, graduation, the day we opened Ryan and Treble Marketing Agency, the day that Jeannie and Mark were married. I had stood in front of an assembly of mutual friends and given a poorly planned, alcohol-aided, best man speech. Everyone seemed to cringe or look away, but Mark listened through the whole deal and even shed a tear or two. The day that Jeannie and Mark's divorce was finalized, we sat on my porch and killed a case of Miller Lite and listened to Cleveland lose Game 7 of the 2016 World Series. I looked at my phone for a while, then went and laid down. The thought of calling Mark and him not answering was too much. I woke up at 7:25, 5 minutes before my alarm. I'd had a dream that I was tangled in a net. I felt the hemp rope digging into my arms and my neck. It was even between my toes. After shaking the dream, I felt surprisingly okay. Losing people, sad as it is, becomes more normal the older you get. It sucks. God does it suck. But it gets livable. On top of feeling okay emotionally, I felt okay physically. More than okay. Actually, I decided to roll with it. Waste not, want not. Time to take a pill. Tsk, tsk, tsk. Johnny boy, can't take these on an empty stomach, I thought, and made myself a big breakfast. I hadn't had an appetite like this in a while and chalked it up to eating my emotions. I sat down to my chow and checked my Facebook feed. Mark's picture was goddamned everywhere. Tons of phony people came from the woodwork. It seemed. College friends I didn't remember. High school friends who may have well never existed. Memories shared. Pictures posted. Who needs an obit when you have a Facebook? As I scrolled, I cried. As I cried, I ate. I finally put my phone down and turned on the small TV on the kitchen counter. I flipped channels for a while and kept on eating. When I looked away from the TV, I got back on my phone. I was fidgeting. I'm wired, I said to myself. I'm goddamn wired. I knew it was the pill, but didn't much care. This felt pretty okay. Maybe I'm just taking speed, Adderall or something like it. I thought, oh well, I'll probably need the energy. I popped pill number 2. Energy I had in spades. I decided to put it to good use. The calls were taken care of. The not-so-fun our business partner has died kind of calls. After letting the client base of T&R Marketing know that he was gone, and that business stuff would be secondary for a while, I got to work on the house. It was a dump. In my rut, I had let chores get away from me. I did my dishes. I did laundry. I started to clean the damn walls. Then the first of the listed side effects started. The itching. It was barely noticeable at first, but it turned into a fire in my forearms. I dug at it until I nearly drew blood, and then decided to take a shower. When I hopped out, dried off, and got dressed, the cleaning continued. When I was cleaning the bathroom tile grout with an old toothbrush, I decided it had to be speed. This is also when I saw the first bug. It wasn't giant or alien looking, but it was gross. It was a worm, but a not-so-normal worm. A fucking silverfish? I thought out loud. No, I don't even know what a silverfish is, but this can't be it. It wasn't silver, for one, and it looked very similar to one of those mealworms that they feed to lizards. This one, however, was a bit bigger, fatter. To be specific, it's palpitating, beige body, had ridges around it. It didn't appear to be hard, and smooth, like the mealworms either. This creature looked fleshy and damp. "Fuck you, fella," I said, while crushing it with the handle of the toothbrush. There was an audible squelch, then a ribbon of bright red blood came shooting out of what I believed to be its head. I cleaned up and went on with my chores. I finished cleaning the windows in the house and decided it was good enough, mainly because I had caught up on everything. I was still wired though, so I decided it was time for a run. I ran through town, around the square, and back. This had done nothing for my energy level, still through the roof, but it had given me hunger pangs. I made myself 3 turkey and cheese sandwiches, stacked high with lettuce and tomato. I stood in the kitchen sweating from the run, zoned out, and devouring my food. I was resigned to the energy now. I didn't want it to go. It was carrying me through the loss of Mark. The energy stayed, and watching some TV in my recliner was out of the question. I was vibrating. I decided to sit down at my desk and do some work. A small ad agency with one graphic designer was frequently backlogged with commissions. Miraculously, with the help of the pill, I busted out 7 original designs and finished up a website. After a mad dash through my emails, finishing our commissions, and even replying to the occasional "sorry for your loss" Facebook message, I sat back and looked around. A spotless house, a clear inbox. I leaned back in my chair and let my eyes close. Sleep came at me quickly. After my eyes were shut, clouds of deep blues and purples began to fill my mind. Inky blackness reached around my brain and gripped it tightly. I was gone. I woke up to loud banging on my door. I jumped from my chair and peeked into the hallway and stared at the stained glass window on the door. Something was leaning against it, moaning. "John," it croaked. I was frozen. The figure suddenly dropped out of sight. Then a hand slammed against the glass. I acted before I could think. "Hey," I cried. "Get the fuck away from my door!" The hand sunk slowly. Then the figure appeared behind the glass again and proceeded to bang on the door. Sounded like the palm of a hand rather than a balled-up fist. "John!" the voice yelled. I recognized it now. It was Jeannie, but she sounded off. I rushed for the door. When I opened it, the smell of booze hit me hard. Jeannie was shithoused drunk. "Ah, Jeannie, what the hell are you doing? Get inside." I pulled her in and sat her in the dining chair he kept in the hall, and she slumped. "He'd be mad. You know," she said matter-of-factly. "He'd be mad that I got drunk without him. I never would drink with him, and it drove him nuts." "Well," I said, sliding down the wall until my ass hit the floor, I feel right now that I should have done less of it with him. I think maybe he drank too much. He would have just had yours for you, she said. Looking at me, she smiled, and I smiled. She then let out a tremendous burp. That sounded like it had some body to it. Are you gonna barf? She looked at me blankly and said, I'm fine. Why are you digging at yourself? You ever heard of soap and water, Johnny boy? She laughed, and then scrambled down the hallway to the bathroom, and after hearing the toilet seat slam against the tank, I heard her begin to retch. I noticed the scratches up my forearms and on my exposed calves. I'd been scratching at myself without even noticing it. Oh my God, that's gross. Jeannie called from the bathroom. Listen, I don't need to hear about how gross it is. Please just clean it up. You wouldn't believe it, but I just cleaned. Not me, you asshole. These worms. What's with all these fucking worms? I made for the bathroom to see what she was talking about, but had a feeling I knew what would be there. As I walked in, Jeannie stepped down from the rim of the tub, pointing at the toilet bowl. There, across the tank, the lid, and the floor were dozens of replicas of the worm from earlier. Yeah, I said, grabbing a roll of toilet paper from under the sink, getting to work scooping the worms into the toilet. I saw one of these guys earlier, thought it was a one-off, but here we are. Jeannie washed her face at the sink and grabbed a towel from the rack and screamed. The towel had a handful of the same, undulating worms. John, these are screw worms. Why the hell do you have screw worms? I have no idea what a screw worm is, for one, and for two, I don't know. They just showed up today. This morning, actually. It was just one though. I didn't know that I was infested with these little shits. Well, it's strange. Screw worms are little parasites, usually hang out inside cows before turning into flies. I have zero idea how you would have screw worms en masse hanging out around your house. Well, me either. I'm sorry to go farm girl on you, but that's gross. I'm a little more sober now, and I think I should go. Yeah? Yeah. I don't know why I came over here in the first place. I don't know if I should be here anyway. I don't really know what to think right now. We looked at each other for a long time before she showed herself out. I cleaned up the bugs but kept one in an old film canister I found at my desk. Anura had asked me to tell him if anything of interest happened, and this was pretty damn interesting. When I get up tomorrow, I'm going to give this guy a ring. I'm also going to look at some exterminators. The itching is getting absolutely horrendous. I can feel it in the palms of my hands now. I'll keep you guys posted as to what happens moving forward, but I'm fucking exhausted.
Story 2.
Bridgehead. When I was 12, I saved a boy in my class from drowning. I was walking home from school with my dad after a ballet rehearsal that had dragged on. It was winter and dark outside, even though it was only 6 p.m. We walked across a wide, well-reinforced bridge that curved upwards into an arch from the side of the riverbank, reaching a peak around 20 feet above the fast-flowing water. Just as we were about to reach the other side, I heard a faint yelp coming from a distance to our left. I turned my head. Even in the darkness, there was no mistaking that a kid was being swept along towards us in the water, the strong current dragging him mercilessly. It was clear that he couldn't swim and was being pulled along like a rag doll, flailing around to no avail. Before my dad could react, I sprinted back across the bridge and ran along the other side of bank, which the boy was closer to. I climbed over the fence running alongside the bank and ran to the edge, then crouched down and stretched my hand out as far as possible. The boy spotted me and tried to stretch his arm out too, but I could see from a distance that it wasn't enough. Our hands were going to be inches from touching, and he would be swept past me. thinking quickly. I took off my pink backpack and pulled out one of the straps to its full length. Then I flung it into the water with my arm outstretched. Holding onto the end of the strap tightly, the bulk of the bag bobbed in the middle of the river. As soon as the boy came past, he grabbed onto it, and I pulled with all my might. When he came within arm's distance, I held out my other hand, and he took it firmly as I pulled him out of the water. We lay clutching each other on the riverbank. He was shivering, soaked from head to toe. My dad finally caught up, shining the flashlight on the back of his phone camera at us. I recognized the boy. It was Noah, from my math class. I'd never talked to him before, though. He was one of the cool kids, a group I wasn't part of, and we sat at opposite ends of the class. Under the light, he also recognized me, and awkwardly let go of my arm. We climbed over the fence to the other side, where my dad was standing. "You all right, son?" asked my dad, catching his breath. "Yes, sir," he said, still trembling from the cold. My dad took off his jacket and wrapped it around Noah. "You hurt?" asked Dad. Noah shook his head. "Come on, let's get you warm back home then." My house was a 10-minute walk away. Noah was understandably quiet and in shock on the way back. When we arrived, I gave Noah one of my sweaters to change into, and Mom offered him dinner at our house. "I really should get going now. My mom's probably worried," he said nervously. "All right, but it's dark out. I'll give you a lift in the car," offered Dad. They left out the front door. The next day, I saw Noah with his friends in the corridor outside the lockers. The terrified, shivering kid I had dragged out of the river yesterday was gone, and he was back to his usual nonchalant self. As he came towards me, we made eye contact for a second, and I looked away quickly. I saw him breaking away from his friends and coming towards me out the corner of my eye. "Hey," he said. I turned to look at him again. "Hi," I replied. "I didn't get to say thanks properly yesterday, so thanks," he said. Don't worry about it," I said. "Want to hang out at lunch?" "Sure, I guess." "Okay, awesome. See you later." We got lunch together after third period and sat at a table opposite each other. "Don't you want to sit with your friends?" I asked. "It's fine. They'll live without me for an hour," he said. We started eating. "How did you end up in the river?" I finally asked. He paused for a second and stared at the chip on his fork. "I was walking home by myself from Jake's house, and I think I slipped when I got to the end of the bridge." "The bridge my dad and I were walking on?" "No. There's another bridge that looks exactly the same as that one a couple yards down." I wondered how that could have happened, as the bridge had barrier railings on both sides. "So you weren't climbing over the rails or anything?" I asked. "Oh, nah. I slipped," he said firmly. "Right." I didn't question further. We started hanging out all the time after that. Noah always came up to me every time he saw me, even if he was with his friends. I usually sat alone at lunch, but now we always sat together. When some older kids tried to take my lunch money outside the lockers, he ran over and told them to shove off. When we got phones, he texted me non-stop and always asked me to come to his house to play video games on the weekends. He texted me a link to a local news article one day, warning parents not to let their kids climb over bridge railings. "Look," it says, "some kid literally drowned in the same river I fell into." "Holy shit," I replied. "That's crazy." I wondered how a kid had even fallen in again. From what I remembered, the bridge had high railings on both sides, and there was a fence alongside both banks. My dad and I had walked across it almost every day without trouble when I was in middle school. It didn't strike me as an incredibly dangerous spot, unless you literally scaled the bridge railings and jumped off, or climbed over the fence along the bank. But even then, there was a healthy stretch of grass between the fence and the river, probably fell in from climbing around. I'd always thought Noah fell in that way too, but assumed he didn't want to admit it. As we got older and went into high school, Noah became handsome and athletic. People gravitated towards him, but somehow, he still stuck to me like glue. Anytime I texted him to meet up for anything, he would arrive without delay. My parents loved Noah, and my dad especially had a soft spot for him and wouldn't stop teasing me about spending so much time with him. On several occasions, I overheard girls talking about us in the bathrooms. They were confused as to why Noah was always with me when I was barely attractive. It hurt to hear, and sometimes I thought they were right. When we were 17, Noah and I were hanging at a park near our high school in the evening. We were alone and sat next to each other on a set of kids' swings that we were getting too big for. The sun was setting behind a wooded stretch in the distance. "Hey, I kinda like you," he said straightforwardly. "Want a date?" I felt my face flushing. "I'm not sure," I said quietly. "You can say no if you don't like me. I won't get mad." He smiled. It's not that," I said. He looked at me, waiting for an answer. "I just wonder sometimes," I continued. "I think you're too good for me. If it hadn't been for that river incident, would we even have been friends?" We sat in silence for a minute. "Probably not," he admitted candidly. "But it happened, so let's not downplay it." He got up and stood in front of me as I rocked back and forth on the swing. "You saved my life," he continued. "I know I'm pretty cool, but that wouldn't mean shit if I was dead. I owe you everything I've got, and I'm yours forever. So will you be mine?" "Stop being cringe or I'll kick you," I said, embarrassed. I tapped him with my shoe. He grabbed my foot and pulled me towards him. "So that's a yes?" I nodded, holding in a smile. So from then on, he was my boyfriend. We graduated high school and went to prom together. I ended up at his place after the prom, and we passed out on the couch. That night, I woke up at 3 a.m. Noah was gripping my arm so tightly that it was cutting off my circulation. "Don't let go. Don't let it get me. Help me," he muttered in his sleep. I touched his cheek, and he seemed to wake up. He suddenly looked at me with the same terrified expression he had when I pulled him out of the water all those years ago. "Hey, I've got you. Don't worry," I said quietly, as he fell back asleep. Time went by fast, and before I knew it, we were a week away from starting college. On the last weekend of our vacation, he sent me a familiar text. Yet again, another kid had drowned in the same river I had saved him in years ago. Another child's body found at the mouth of the river. "Again? That's awful," I replied. "That's 5 kids now, 6 including me. I think there's something going on there." "Whim? I'll show you. Meet me there." As I trekked the same 10-minute walk along the path I used to take to get to middle school, I wondered what he was going to show me. I walked up to him, standing at the head of the bridge my dad and I had walked across years ago. He was looking down, concerned. "What's up?" I chirped. "You see how there's no gap between the fence and where the bridge meets the side of the river?" he asked. "Yeah," I nodded. He gestured for me to follow him. We walked for a minute over to the second bridge, just barely in view from the first. He then pointed towards the same corresponding spot at the head of this second bridge. This was where I was when I fell. At the head of this second bridge, there was a gap of a few feet where the fence ended and the foot of the bridge began. There was about a 4-foot drop between the grass and the water below. I could see how someone could have fallen in if they purposefully walked off the side of the grass through the gap. But it still didn't seem like a place you could slip through easily. "There's something I didn't tell you the day after you saved me," he began, probably because I convinced myself it didn't happen, and it was really dark, so I didn't see anything. Actually, I'm still not sure if it did. I waited for him to get to the point, but I'm pretty sure I felt something pull my ankle as I walked past this gap. "Something pulled you?" "Yeah, definitely felt something yank my ankle. I convinced myself I'd just slipped on mud, but reading all these news articles, that's at least 5 kids that fell in this same river. I mean, 5 in a few years isn't shocking, but everyone knows not to climb in this area. The whole place is fenced off. So, I'm starting to think the same thing might have happened to those other kids in this spot." I walked up to the edge of the riverbank where the gap was and looked around down it. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a gap of unfenced grass. "What do you think pulled you?" I asked. I didn't see anything. It was dark. I'm sure I felt something grab my ankle though. This is weird, but it felt like a hand. A hand? I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's what it felt like. He started walking across the bridge to the other side, and I followed. There was a sparse wooded area surrounding the path that the bridge exited into. Noah walked through it to a bench a few yards away, and we sat on it. "I've just been watching people walking across the bridge for the past few days in the afternoon. You get a good view from here," he said. I looked at him. "Okay, that sounded weird, but for research purposes only. You know what I'm saying?" "What are you looking for?" I asked. "I don't really know, but I've got my eye on that gap next to the bridgehead on the other side." "Seen any zombie hands pop out and drag people in?" "Not yet," he said. We talked for a bit as the sun set and it started getting dark. A couple of people walked across the bridge in that time. Dog walkers, kids going home from school, the like. We were mid-conversation when we spotted 2 tall men dressed in all black start to walk across the bridge. There was something off about them, and we both caught on. We stopped talking abruptly and stared in silence. As they got to the end of the bridge, one of them stepped through the gap where there was no fence and reached out towards the underside of the bridge. He pulled himself from the bank onto the underside of the bridge, almost disappearing from view, except for one of his legs as he stood on a bit of scaffolding under the bridge. The other man followed, swinging off the side of the perching next to the first man. Their silhouettes were barely visible in the darkness and through the distance, but unmistakably present. "The fuck?" muttered Noah. I stared in confusion. We watched them for a few minutes, lurking under the bridge. "Jesus," said Noah. "Are they hiding under there to try and pull people into the river?" I took a second look. The distance between them and the unfenced part of the riverbank right next to the bridgehead was just within arm's reach. A chill ran through me. A couple walking their dog strolled over the bridge. I held my breath as they reached the other side and walked off the head of the bridge, past the gap in the fence. Nothing happened. Noah and I looked at each other tensely. In the next few minutes, an old man and another couple walked across the bridge without issue. "Maybe they're just chilling out there," I said. Noah was quiet, still staring as a young girl started walking over the bridge. As she got closer to the other side, one of the men leaned out from under the bridge and reached his arm out into the gap. "Oh shit," muttered Noah, standing up. Before I could clock what was going on, he ran out of the wooded area and to the foot of the bridge. "Stop," he yelled. The girl turned. "It's dangerous. Come back this way." The girl stood still, looking at him in confusion. "Come back over to this side," shouted Noah. She slowly started backing away from the head of the bridge. Yeah, that's it, he gestured. I caught up and stood next to him, waving and also shouting at the top of my lungs. Come back here. Suddenly, the two men clambered out from underneath the bridge and pulled themselves onto the riverbank. They ran onto the bridge. The girl screamed and started running towards us at breakneck speed, while the two men in black chased her and got closer to our end of the bridge. I panicked and instinctively retreated, but Noah ran forward straight onto the bridge and into the trajectory of the two men. He tackled one of them to the ground, and the other one joined in the brawl, allowing the girl to escape and reach the bank. She ran to my side and looked back. I looked at Noah in panic. I'll be fine. Go! He shouted. I hesitated. Move! He yelled. I took the girl's hand and we darted away from the bridge, my heart racing wildly. We got to the main road, where we went into a shop for cover. I called the cops and explained the situation to them and the shop staff, leaving the girl with one of them. 40 minutes max. Then, I ran back out and towards the bridge again. Stupid move, I know. What if the men were still out there? But I had to make sure Noah was okay. I got to the bridge and it was quiet. It was pitch black now, except from the moon which reflected on the surface of the water. Not a person in sight. Noah, I yelled. My voice echoed through the trees behind me, then silence. I ran to the peak of the bridge at the very center and collapsed on my knees. I could see cops running towards me in the distance. I managed to hold it together and explain what happened to them, that the girl was safe, but that I now had no idea where Noah or the two men dressed in black were. 2 days passed. 3 bodies were found in the lake that the river opened out into. One of the men in black had a knife on him and stabbed Noah in the gut 5 times. Then they tried to throw him off the side of the bridge, but he dragged them overboard and all 3 ended up in the water. These 2 men had been spotted by several passers-by, who didn't think much of them other than being a couple of fools or possibly construction workers. They came out in the dark a couple times a year and waited under the bridge for hours at a time for children walking alone to drag into the water as a twisted hobby. Most of the time, they wouldn't catch their target demographic, but about once a year, a child would go missing, then end up in the lake or washed up on the riverbank under unexplained circumstances. That pattern ended along with Noah. Naturally, I was inconsolable for months, having just lost my boyfriend and best friend of 6 years. After the grief, I was numb. Looking back, the mystery had been on Noah's mind ever since the second child who fell in died. The 2 men had just moved to the area 6 years ago. Noah would have been the first victim. He acted different that day at school, and although I couldn't tell what he was thinking, I knew something was on his mind. Initially, I thought he had shaken off his near-death experience with ease, but it came back to haunt him many nights. He finally got the answer he was looking for. What he felt was undoubtedly real, and more sinister than anyone could have imagined. They tried to kill him once, but he lived to tell the tale. Then he came back and took them down. I love you, Noah.
Story 3.
I wish I never went to the bathroom. It has been over a week since I last left the apartment. I was meant to return to work the other day, but have been avoiding my boss's calls. She's out there now, watching me. I can see her through the window. She'll leave soon, but then she'll be back tomorrow. If not tomorrow, then the day after that. Same time, same place, always watching. It started in the bathroom of a McDonald's just down the road from where I work. It had been a long shift, and I had to stay behind 2 hours as a co-worker called in sick. My legs were tired from standing all day, and my eyes were drooping from exhaustion. I washed my hands at the sink. The mirror reflected my awful features, bags under the eyes, acne scarring on my face. I felt icky. What are you doing here? A woman called from behind me. I flicked my hands in the sink to quickly dry them as I turned to face her. "Excuse me," she continued. "What are you doing in here?" In front of me was a 40-something-year-old woman, blonde hair and wearing sunglasses indoors. She looked furious. "Just washing my hands," I said. "You're a man?" she said. "I'm not." "What are you doing in the female bathroom, you freak?" She raised her voice over mine. "I'm just using the toilet." The woman pulled out her phone and, presumably, started recording me. "This pervert is in the ladies' bathroom checking on women." I lifted my hand up to block my face from the camera and walked brusquely out into the restaurant. I could hear the woman's heavy footfalls trail behind me. "Look at this groomer walking off now he's been called out," she said. I walked up to the front counter. No doubt she was there too. A member of staff was standing there putting an order together. "Hey," I leaned over. "Can you stop her?" "Oh yeah, call the cops." "We'll see what they have to say when they arrive," she said behind me. "Sorry, ma'am," the staff member said. "What's going on here?" "I don't know," I said. "I'm just trying to use the bathroom and she's harassing me." "Go on. Call them! They'll kick this freak out." "Ma'am," the worker said to her, "I'm going to have to ask you to stop or leave." "Stop what?" she said. "I'm just calling out this pedophile so they'll stop creeping on little girls." The worker sighed. "I'll just call the cops." "Yeah, they'll get this sicko out of here," she said. I sighed. "You know what? I'll just go." "Are you sure?" "Ma'am," the worker said. "Ma'am," the woman said. "That's a dude." "Yeah, I just needed the toilet anyway," I said. "I don't want to make a fuss." "Run away," she said. "Run away like the freak you are." Apart from the shouting woman, the place was completely silent as every bystander watched the situation unfold. I pulled my hoodie over my head and walked out the building as fast as I could. She followed. I walked across the McDonald's parking lot over to the supermarket next to me, where I parked my car. The entire time, the heckler followed me, her phone still up and recording. I tried to ignore her as she kept screaming absurd shit over and over. It didn't take long to make it back to the car. I jumped in and locked the door. The woman pulled the handle as soon as it clicked. Luckily, she was too slow. My hands choked the wheel as the adrenaline started to fade. I didn't realize how fast my heart was beating until it began to slow. She stood outside the window, still filming and shouting her obscenities as I got control of my breathing. After a minute, I started the car and reversed out of the space. She followed, still recording from the window. Once on the road, I put it into drive and sped out of the parking lot. I saw her standing in the rearview mirror, phone in hand, still screaming. A day later, the experience still left a mark on me. I dreamed about it overnight. Her face was vivid in my mind. All day I was filled with regret that I didn't let the police take care of it and hopefully get the woman taken away. Everything I didn't say to her floated in my head. I noticed it first when I took my dog out for a walk. A banged-up blue Chevrolet. Must have been from the 70s. The paint was peeling, replaced with rust. I didn't get a good look in from across the street. The glare from the sun was too strong, but it left an impression on me. I'd never seen a vehicle so distinct on this street before. Throughout the day, I kept looking out the window. The car was still there, down the road. I couldn't make out any features from the distance, but there was someone sitting in the driver's seat. It was freaking me out. I closed all the blinds in my apartment and tried to put it out of my mind for the time being. I was working the next day. It was at a cafe franchise in the same complex as the McDonald's. Most of my shift was spent making coffee and wiping down tables. The same old shit every day. Customers ranged from okay to horrible. I was just happy to get a paycheck. We closed later than most cafes at around 10 p.m., though we were usually out of there by 10:45 p.m. I noticed it when mopping the front of house. It wasn't so easy to see in the dark of night, but there was a blue Chevrolet, same model, same rusted coat, in the parking lot just outside the store. Again, I couldn't see the person sitting in the driver's seat, so I wandered out back and checked the cameras. Also not good enough, even when zoomed in. My coworker kept asking if I was okay, even though he tried to hide it. He was clearly annoyed that I was slowing down the close for no reason. I got on with mopping, but kept my eye on the parking lot. By the time we got out, the car was gone. It was back outside the apartment the next day. The car would arrive at around 10 a.m. and leave at 9 p.m. A few times throughout the day, it would leave and then come back an hour or so later. I could see the person sitting there for hours and hours, but I didn't want to confront them out of fear of what they might do. When I went in for my next shift, my co-workers were all staring at me. I greeted them with a good afternoon, but everyone returned it with a harsh glare as I was stuffing my bag into a locker in the back office. The store phone began ringing. My other co-worker in the back quickly shuffled out of there, ignoring the ringing. After a couple of seconds, it stopped. I closed the locker and put the key into my trouser pocket. The phone began ringing again. No one from front came out back. It was company policy that the phone must be picked up, but I wasn't to start my shift for another 5 minutes. I sat down at the office and listened to it ring until it eventually stopped. 10 seconds hadn't passed before the phone started to ring again. I picked it up. No caller ID was displayed on the screen. "You've reached..." "Who is this?" A woman's voice commanded on the other end. Is this Amy?" I was shocked into silence for a moment. "How do you know me?" "What's your real name?" "What?" "You need to stop playing dress up. It doesn't suit you well." "Who is this?" I looked at the monitor and saw the blue Chevrolet parked outside. "Is that you following me?" I asked. "Stop pretending to be a woman, then I'll leave you alone." She hung up. I watched the Chevrolet pull out of the space and exit the parking lot on the monitor. I didn't see her again all day. When I got home after closing, a notification appeared from Facebook Messenger. It was a random account, no photo, fake name, requesting to DM me. I opened their request. "Hey, you don't know me, but I've been following this random page for a while. A handful of people are sharing your photos and private information around. Sorry you had to find out this way." They attached screenshots of posts from this group. All of them had my photos, ripped from my Facebook and Instagram accounts, posted along with disparaging comments and personal information. One of the posts even shared my address and workplace. Some screenshots of comments showed people taking glee in the idea of hurting me. All of them made fun of how I looked, picking apart all my insecurities one by one. "He's too tall. Look at those big hands. Why is he caked in makeup in every photo?" The anonymous account linked the group, but it was private. I called in sick the next day and took everything I had seen to the police. I told a detective about the Chevrolet, the online posts, the woman in the McDonald's, everything. I printed off the screenshots. I gave them the link to the account. I noted the reg number of the car. All the detective did was assure me everything was going to be okay and made a report, although the lack of immediate action was concerning. I got home 2 hours later. The car was parked up on the same spot it had occupied for days. I called the police then, wanting to make sure a tangible incident report was made, hopefully creating a paper trail if it ever escalated. However, before the cops could arrive, the car was gone. They somehow knew the police were coming. I made my report to the officers, and they scolded me for wasting their time before driving off. When I got into work the next day, my manager pulled me aside before I started my shift. He sat me down next to him in the office. "We've been getting reports," he said, "from employees here and head office of someone harassing everyone, and they keep naming you. I just want to make sure everything's okay and know if I can do anything to help." "What?" I was taken aback. "What about the head office?" "Well," he said, "HR have been getting floods of calls from no caller ID numbers and emails spammed to them. It's clear they're getting put into spam databases and stuff. We've had to turn the phone off here because people keep calling at all hours of the day. Head office have made reports to the police, but they're still investigating and want to make sure we give you the proper support." My heart sank. Everyone in the store had heard the women's rants. Even the middle management that know of me through the paperwork they receive. All of them know the embarrassing comments some random woman made about me. All of them knew I was being stalked. The surveillance monitors were open on the desk. I looked up at them and saw the blue Chevrolet was in the parking lot. Something broke. I got up and walked out the door. My manager called after me, though I can't recall his words. There was a sizable chunk of concrete broken off the sidewalk just outside. I took it in my hand and made for the car. I got a close look at the driver, the same blonde, 40-something woman that had harassed me in the McDonald's. She saw me coming and immediately started the ignition and drove for the exit. "Leave me the fuck alone!" I screamed. I arced my hand. The concrete left my palm and flew towards the Chevrolet. It missed the roof by a few inches and kept flying until it hit a black BMW parked behind it. The concrete broke in half as it left a massive crack on the windscreen. I fell to the floor. The emotions had finally hit me as the adrenaline wore off. I began crying and didn't stop for an hour. The police came. When the customer eventually came back to their car from the supermarket, he was pissed. Luckily, the two officers were able to keep things relatively calm. My manager spoke for me as I sat in the cafe. The two officers came in and informed me that he wasn't pressing charges so long as I covered the damages. Even though I had little money to my name, I agreed. My manager then told me to take a couple days off and said he was there if I needed help. All my co-workers stared at me in complete shock as I left the cafe. None of them said a word. I drove home by myself. Even though he needed it, I decided not to take my dog for a walk. I didn't want to be outside by myself at that moment. Instead, I made a cup of coffee and sat by the window. The blue Chevrolet is parked down the street, always watching.
Story 4.
I spied on my sister and her boyfriend. It was so much worse than kissing. When I was around 8, I watched my older sister and her boyfriend, James. They had an air of secrecy about them. Thinking back to it, James had a strange attractiveness about him. Tall, with lanky arms, and pink lips that protruded in an almost perfect oval. Anne, I suppose, objectively, had a flattering figure, a thin nose that ended in a pronounced little button. I crouched behind some car junk, old hubcaps, and the rusted frame of a Toyota. Anne and James were on the opposite side of the little valley, and they walked down to the edge of the stream. There was a great thicket of foliage that kept me from seeing anything below their waists. James trudged behind Anne, who walked briskly. I could hear James speaking to my sister at the water. Thank God we're alone. James looked around to clarify, and I hoped I was truly hidden. The moment I saw you, I realized the reason for my existence. I knew that you were meant to be mine, and I knew that I was meant to be yours. You are my idol, the one that I worship. I am in love with you. I've never been so in love. Anne, I'd never ask for your affection. I am undeserving, unworthy. But if I can please... There was a thud and a great splash in the water. Anne said something to James that I couldn't make out, but he stopped talking. James stumbled and landed a kiss on Annie. An accident. Anne backed away from him and smeared the kiss from her face in overt rejection. I discovered I was sitting in ants and being bitten. I let out a yelp. From there, Anne's demeanor changed. She flew into James's arms and began kissing him passionately. He stood only for a moment, and then returned her advances. They fell into each other, and down into the foliage out of my sight. There was a poison. The two young lovers kissed and laughed, but the air was rotted. There was something unworldly. A screaming in my mind told me that I wasn't supposed to be there. So, I ran. I got out from behind that rusted truck and I ran, careful to keep my head below the foliage. It didn't matter. Anne heard me, and as an older teenager, her legs could travel quicker than mine. She caught up to me and grabbed me by the arm. I did what kids do and let the full weight of my body drop the floor. She yanked me up. I could feel her fingers digging into bicep where I was sure purple bruises would soon grow. She looked at me with malice, her eyes fixed and radiating none of the sisterly love I might expect. "Let me go," I shouted, afraid. "You're a good boy, Sam," Anne said with a glib sweetness. Behind her, I saw James where Anne left him. He was standing and looking at me with what I think now was pity. He stood there and shook his head, begging me not to make any sudden movements. James ran up to Anne and stood behind me to block me from trying an escape. James spoke in a way that felt genuine and desperate. Maybe he didn't like what he'd gotten himself into. As Anne was saying, "You're a good boy." When I was a kid, I used to spy on my older brother and his girlfriend. I know what it's like to be curious at your age. Anne loosened her grip on my arm, and I shook it a couple times. "What were you doing?" I asked, hoping for a satisfactory answer to disperse the looming fog of fear. "I think you have an idea of what we were doing. You're old enough," Anne said. "Just don't tell Mom. Please, Sam. James is really important to me, and you know exactly how Mom is." Anne rolled her eyes for emphasis. I was relieved, but now I had something on them. It's an obligation of younger siblings to a bother to their older siblings. "I won't say anything if you give me $1. James took a crumpled dollar bill from his pocket, gave it to me, and shrugged. I ran off. All was okay. My sibling and her boyfriend were young lovers. We shared a secret, and I was $1 richer. The next day I was sitting on the steps behind the banister, while James and Anne were crouched by a set of boxes in the living room. I figured the more secrets I had, the more favors I could get. I wondered how much money I could get from James. "That little shit," Anne sneered. "He's just a kid," James offered. "A kid who's going to ruin this." She tapped one of the boxes with her hand. I ran out down the stairs and into the living room. "Found you. Again." Anne looked at James, and James blushed. Just like last time, he pulled a crumpled dollar out of his pocket and gave it to me. It was all in a day's work, and I ran upstairs to put the dollar bill next to the other one in the drawer where I kept my socks and the old bags of chips I'd snuck upstairs. I tormented the two of them for a month. There were more boxes and more trips to the field. There was a smell about the house, and James fell into a daze. He followed my sister around like a dog, and I hardly noticed. I was having so much getting a rise of them, getting bits of money. I thought it was harmless fun, and I should have noticed all that was wrong. I should have noticed how my mother only came out of her room once in a while, and how when she did, she stared into the distance at absolutely nothing at all. It was September 1st. At around 3 in the morning, there were no boxes in the living room, but a circle of heads. Some I recognized as neighbors, some I thought I might have seen before, and some were strangers to me. Each had a candle sticking out of their scalp that burned, while wax dripped in long strings from their noses. Some of them had a look of concern about them, and some had tongues that lolled from their mouths, and bits of saliva that dripped to the floor. I was in my usual spot at the top of the stairs, behind the banister. This time I didn't want to jump out to surprise them. Instead I shook, and tears filled my eyes. It was like that first time in the field, but so much worse than that. Not that strange fear of a child's imagination, but something real. Something that shouldn't be, but was. "Come down, Sam," Anne ordered. James just sat by the circle of heads. I don't think there was much in him at that point. Whatever my sister did to him, she had done it completely. I walked down the stairs. I knew there was no use trying to escape. I stood before her out of breath. I tried to speak, but nothing. Anne shouted again, "Mom, come to here!" I heard the creak of our mom's door from the left of where we stood and the soft sliding of her slippers against the carpet. She had the same dazed look that James sported, the same thing done to her. "All of you, get in the middle of the circle." She shot a glance at each one of us. I'd never seen my sister so happy. There was an unrepentant glee in every word she spoke. There was a bounce in her movements. My mother and my sister's lover walked right into the middle of those horrible heads. Those heads were watching them. "Get in the circle," Anne screeched at me. I just screamed. I screamed as loud as I could and hoped that someone could hear me and save me from this. The house had become lost in a void beyond time and goodness. But maybe I could break through. Maybe there was hope. "Get in the fucking circle." Anne grabbed me by the arm and dragged me into the circle. The mouth of each head opened then and started a low groan and started to chant. Some unknown language full of clicks and sounds I think impossible for a human to make. I tried to move but froze instead. "It's happening," Anne shouted. An ant crawled out of my pocket. The tiniest creature would be the one to save our lives. It had a chip crumb from one of those upstairs chip bags, and it walked down my pant onto my socks and then across the floor, blissfully unaware of the world of the unknown and the demonic affairs we were trapped in. It walked past the heads, and the heads all at once stopped moaning and fell over. The life came back to James and my mother's eyes. We all pushed back Anne and ran out the door into the neighborhood street. Dawn was soon, and the earlier birds were chirping. Everything was normal again. A few years later, when I was a bit older, I had my own girlfriend. We sat in that field behind the rusted Toyota that stayed unchanged apart from the foliage that was slowly enveloping it. My heart swelled with love. I wanted to tell her exactly how I felt, how I wanted to be with her forever. But instead, I just turned and said to her, "Sarah, I'm glad you're here." "I'm glad you're here, too." Sarah smiled and kissed me on the lips. My world lit up, and I closed my eyes to savor the emotion. "Watch out for the anthill. By the way," I said as Sarah shifted.
Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If you dare to explore further, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling tales of horror and the supernatural. Remember, the shadows hold endless mysteries, waiting to be unveiled. Stay tuned for more bone-chilling stories as we continue to traverse the eerie depths of the unknown together. Until next time, may your dreams be free from the haunting echoes of our tales. Or perhaps not.